My name is Claire, and for years, I believed that the hardest thing a person could face was losing their health. I was wrong. Sometimes, the hardest thing is discovering that while you are fighting to survive, the people you trusted most are quietly taking everything you worked for. It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had been feeling strange for several days. At first, I blamed stress. Then came the dizziness, the weakness, and finally, the moment when I collapsed in my kitchen. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room. My husband, Daniel, was sitting beside the bed. He looked worried. At least, that's what I thought. He held my hand and told me not to worry about anything. "Your only job is to get better," he said. I believed him. I had been married to Daniel for 11 years. We had built a comfortable life together. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We had a nice home, 2 cars, savings, and several credit cards that we occasionally used for large purchases. Daniel handled most of our household finances. I never questioned it. That was my first mistake. During my second day in the hospital, Daniel told me he needed to go home for a few hours. "I'll take care of everything," he promised. I smiled and thanked him. I didn't know that while I was lying in that hospital bed, connected to machines and waiting for test results, Daniel was making a phone call that would eventually change our marriage forever. He called the credit card company. And he booked a luxury cruise. Not for us. For himself, his brother, his brother's wife, and 2 other relatives. The total cost was thousands of dollars. And the entire amount was charged to a credit card in my name. At that moment, I knew nothing. I was simply trying to breathe normally again. That evening, Daniel returned to the hospital carrying flowers. He kissed my forehead. "Everything is under control," he said. I smiled. "Thank you." He looked at me for a moment and then added something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "You should focus on getting back to work." I didn't understand why he said that. I was sick. I had just been hospitalized. But Daniel was already thinking about work. I pushed the thought away. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself I was overthinking. And I told myself that my husband would never betray me. 3 days later, I received a notification on my phone. It was from my credit card company. There had been a large purchase. I stared at the screen. Luxury cruise. Several $1,000s. My hands started shaking. I looked toward Daniel. He was sitting in the chair beside my hospital bed. I asked him one simple question. "Daniel, what's this charge?" He looked at the screen. Then he looked at me. And instead of apologizing, he smiled. For the next few days, I kept telling myself I was overthinking everything. Mail gets delayed. Envelopes get lost. People forget things. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Still, every afternoon, I'd unlock my mailbox with a tiny bit of hope, only to find bills, advertisements, and grocery store flyers, but never an invitation to my own sister's baby shower. A week passed. Then another. By then, nearly everyone in the family was talking about the event. My cousin Rachel texted me a picture of the invitation. It was beautiful. Cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering, tiny watercolor flowers around the edges, and a note asking guests to wear pastel colors. At the bottom, it listed the venue, a beautiful event hall about 20 minutes from my apartment. Rachel wrote, "Isn't this gorgeous?" Emily really went all out. I stared at the picture for several seconds. I still hadn't received one. For the first time, I started wondering if this wasn't a mailing mistake after all. I picked up my phone and sent Emily a simple message. "Hey. I haven't gotten my invitation yet. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't sent to the wrong address." I read the message 3 times before pressing send. I didn't want it to sound accusatory. She didn't reply. Hours passed. That evening, I saw that she'd posted photos on social media from lunch with friends. She was obviously using her phone. Still no response. The next morning, I sent another text. No rush. Just checking because Mom said invitations were mailed last week. Nothing. By the third day, I felt embarrassed. Maybe she was busy. Maybe I was bothering her. Then, just before dinner, my phone buzzed. Emily had finally replied. Oh, we're actually at full capacity. That was it. One sentence. No apology. No explanation. Just. We're at full capacity. I frowned. The answer didn't make any sense. She had spent weeks telling everyone how she'd rented a large venue because she wanted a huge celebration. How could they suddenly run out of space? I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. So, should I just RSVP later if someone cancels? A few minutes later, another message appeared. I'll let you know. That response hurt more than I expected. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how cold they felt. This wasn't someone talking to her sister. It sounded like I was asking for tickets to a sold-out concert. That weekend, our parents invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. Emily and Jason were already there when I arrived. She greeted me with a quick hug. Jason smiled politely. Neither of them mentioned the baby shower. Not once. Instead, they spent most of dinner talking about guest lists, decorations, and party favors. Emily laughed about the dessert table. Jason joked that his office friends couldn't wait to meet the family. I sat there quietly, waiting for someone to explain why I apparently wasn't important enough to be included. No one did. After dinner, I helped Mom wash the dishes. When Emily and Jason left, Mom noticed I seemed unusually quiet. Is everything okay? She asked. I hesitated. I never got invited to the baby shower. She looked confused. What do you mean? I asked Emily. What did she say? I repeated the exact message. We're at full capacity. Mom's face changed. She looked genuinely surprised. That can't be right. I thought so too. She dried her hands on a towel. Let me talk to her. I immediately shook my head. No. I don't want to start drama. If she doesn't want me there, I'll just stay home. Mom frowned. You're her sister. There has to be some misunderstanding. I smiled weakly. I hope you're right. But deep inside, for the first time, I wasn't sure there was any misunderstanding at all. Something told me this wasn't an accident. Someone had made a decision. And I was afraid I already. 2 days after our family dinner, I was making coffee before work when my phone rang. It was Mom. That wasn't unusual, but something about the way she said my name made my stomach tighten. Sarah, do you have a minute? Of course. She sighed before speaking again. I talked to Emily. I leaned against the kitchen counter, hoping she was about to tell me everything had been a misunderstanding. Instead, there was a long, uncomfortable silence. What did she say? I asked. Mom hesitated. She still wants you to come. I blinked. Okay. But. There it was. That one word. But. She said there still isn't a seat available. I frowned. What does that even mean? Mom lowered her voice. She said someone might leave after they finish eating. I stared out my apartment window, trying to process what she was saying. So. I'm supposed to stand around until someone leaves. Another long silence. Then Mom quietly said the words I will never forget. Emily suggested you could wait at the pub across the street. For a second, I honestly thought I'd heard her wrong. I'm sorry, what? The pub across from the venue. She said you could have a drink there while you wait. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain refused to believe it was real. You're joking. I wish I was. Mom sounded embarrassed. She said once a few guests leave, someone can come get you. I felt my face grow hot. So everyone else gets to celebrate together. And I'm supposed to sit alone in a bar. Mom didn't answer. I already knew why. Because there wasn't a good answer. I walked into my living room, trying to calm myself down. Did she really say that? Yes. Word for word. Mom sighed again. She said the pub isn't very nice. But it would only be for an hour or two. That made it even worse. She knew it wasn't a nice place. She knew exactly what she was asking me to do. I remembered the pub immediately. Old wooden sign. Sticky tables. A place where construction workers stopped after long shifts. Nothing wrong with that. But it certainly wasn't somewhere you'd send your own sister while the rest of the family celebrated a baby shower. I rubbed my forehead. Mom. Why me? Why not ask one of Jason's coworkers? Another pause. This one lasted even longer. Finally. Mom answered. Because Jason really wants them there. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth. I wasn't being replaced by family. I was being replaced by coworkers. People Emily had known for less than 2 years were apparently more important than the sister who had spent months helping prepare for this baby. I couldn't believe it. How many coworkers are coming? I think 8. 8? Yes. So she couldn't tell one of them there wasn't enough room? Mom spoke carefully. She said Jason's promotion depends on maintaining good relationships. I almost laughed again. So my relationship with my own sister matters less than Jason trying to impress his boss. Mom didn't disagree. Instead, she quietly said, I know this isn't fair. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because it confirmed she knew exactly how wrong it was. I sat down on my couch. Did Emily even seem upset about this? Mom hesitated. Not really. She kept saying she was sure you'd understand. Understand? She expected me to understand why I was being treated like an optional guest at my own sister's baby shower. I thought about every weekend I'd spent painting walls. Every meal I'd cooked. Every box I'd carried upstairs. Every late-night phone call where I'd listened to her cry about morning sickness and anxiety. Apparently, none of it mattered. To Emily, I wasn't family. I was convenient. Useful. Easy to take for granted. I took a deep breath. Mom. I'm not doing it. I will not sit in some dirty pub waiting for permission to attend my own sister's baby shower. I have too much self-respect for that. Mom didn't argue. She simply whispered. I was afraid you'd say that. I know. I'll talk to her again. No. I stopped her. Please don't. If Emily really thinks this is acceptable, nothing you say is going to change who she is. After we hung up, I sat in silence for nearly an hour. I kept hoping my phone would ring. That Emily would call. That she'd laugh and say the whole thing had been a terrible misunderstanding. She never did. Instead, later that afternoon, she sent me a single text message. I hope you're not making this into a big deal. I stared at the screen. After everything. She thought I was the one causing the problem. That was the moment something inside me changed. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn a place in someone else's family. Because if my own sister believed I belonged across the street instead of beside her, maybe I didn't belong there at all. The next morning, I received a message from Daniel's sister-in-law. She wrote, "Thank you so much for the cruise. We really needed this." I stared at the message. So they knew. I replied with one question. Who told you I was paying for it? She didn't answer immediately. Then she wrote. Daniel said it was taken care of. Taken care of. That phrase kept repeating in my mind. I called Emily. She told me to save every message. I did. Then another message arrived. This one was from Daniel's brother. He thanked me for being generous. Generous. I wasn't generous. I hadn't even agreed to the trip. I finally understood. Daniel had told his family that I had willingly paid for the vacation. He had turned my money into a gift. And somehow, I was expected to accept it. When Daniel came to the hospital that evening, I confronted him. Your family thinks I paid for their cruise as a gift. He looked at me. So. Daniel, I never agreed to this. He crossed his arms. You would have said no. Yes. He looked surprised. Exactly. I couldn't believe it. So you knew I wouldn't agree. He didn't answer. I asked him how long this had been happening. He said I was being dramatic. I asked about the jewelry purchase. He said it was a gift for his mother. The hotel? Family business. The restaurant? A celebration. The cash withdrawals? He couldn't remember. I felt exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. I told him that I wanted access to every account. He refused. That was when I became afraid. Not of Daniel physically. But of what else I might discover. I contacted a financial advisor through Emily. The advisor told me to gather every document I could. Bank statements. Credit card statements. Loan information. Insurance documents. Tax records. Everything. So I did. Over the next 2 days, I discovered that Daniel had been moving money between accounts for months. He had also opened a separate savings account that I knew nothing about. The balance wasn't huge. But it was enough to prove that he had been hiding money. I asked him about it. He finally admitted it. I wanted something for myself. I said. You already had access to everything. He looked away. Then he said. You were always better with money. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Because I had spent years believing we were partners. Apparently, he had been keeping score. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight with him. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to protect myself. And I started by making one phone call. A lawyer. The lawyer listened carefully. I explained everything from the beginning. The hospitalization. The credit card charges. The cruise. The hidden account. The family members who believed I had paid willingly. When I finished, she said something simple. Stop giving him access to your finances. I had already begun doing that. But hearing it from a professional made the situation feel real. She told me to document everything. She also told me not to destroy or alter any records. If you didn't authorize a transaction, don't pretend that you did. I nodded. Then she asked me an uncomfortable question. Do you have your own account? I said yes. But Daniel had access to it. She told me to open a separate account and move only the funds that were legally and safely mine, with professional advice. She also advised me to secure my identity documents. I went home from the hospital a few days later. Daniel drove me. The house looked exactly the same. But it didn't feel like home anymore. On the kitchen counter, I found a cruise brochure. I picked it up. There was a picture of a beautiful ship sailing through blue water. The trip was supposed to begin in 3 days. I looked at the names. Daniel. His brother. His sister-in-law. 2 other relatives. My name wasn't there. I laughed bitterly. They were going on a luxury vacation using my money. while I was recovering from a serious health scare. That evening, Daniel asked me if I was going to cancel the cruise. I looked at him. I already contacted the card company. His face became pale. What did you do? I reported the transactions I didn't authorize. He became angry. You could ruin everything. I said. No, Daniel. You already did. He told me I was embarrassing him. I reminded him that he had used my card without permission. He said I was his wife. I answered. Being your wife doesn't mean you own me. For the first time, Daniel had nothing to say. The next morning, I received a call from the credit card company. They had frozen the account. The cruise reservation was being reviewed. And Daniel's family was furious. My phone started filling with messages. They called me selfish, ungrateful, difficult. One person even said I was destroying the family. I read every message. Then I put my phone down. I realized something. They were angry because the money had stopped. Not because I was hurting. And that realization gave me the strength to stop explaining myself. 3 days later, Daniel's family arrived at the cruise terminal. They expected to board. They had luggage packed. They had made reservations. They were excited. But the payment method had been frozen. The cruise company required confirmation of the charges. Daniel called me repeatedly. I didn't answer. He left voicemail after voicemail. At first, he begged. Then he threatened. Then he became angry. Finally, he said. If you don't fix this, our marriage is over. I listened to that message twice. Then I deleted it. The cruise was eventually cancelled or rebooked depending on which portions could be refunded. Some money was recovered. Some wasn't. But for me, the most important thing wasn't the money. It was what happened afterward. Daniel came home furious. He accused me of humiliating him. I asked him one question. Did you think about me when you booked the trip? He said nothing. Did you think about me when you used my card? Silence. Did you think about me when I was in the hospital? Still nothing. Then he finally said. I thought you'd understand. I looked at him. Understand what? That I needed a break. I almost cried. Not because I felt sorry for him. Because I finally understood how differently we saw our marriage. For me, marriage meant partnership. For Daniel, apparently, it meant access. Access to my money. My credit. My trust. My patience. My forgiveness. He had assumed that because I loved him, I would eventually accept anything. He was wrong. I spent the next few weeks reviewing every financial document. I found more questionable transactions. Some were small. Some were large. But together, they told a story. Daniel had been living beyond what we could comfortably afford. He had been trying to impress his family. He had been hiding debt. And he had been using my credit to maintain an image. The luxury cruise wasn't the beginning. It was simply the moment I finally saw the pattern. One evening, Emily came over. She looked at all the paperwork spread across my dining table. Are you going to leave him? I didn't answer immediately. I looked around the house. There were 11 years of memories everywhere. Photographs. Furniture we had chosen together. Wedding pictures. Vacations. Birthday cards. I wanted to believe those memories were still real. But I couldn't ignore what was happening now. Finally, I said. I don't know if I can stay with someone I can't trust. Emily reached across the table and held my hand. You don't have to decide tonight. And she was right. I didn't. But I knew one thing. The woman who had entered that hospital believing everything was fine was gone. Something inside me had changed. A few weeks later, Daniel finally admitted more than he had before. He had accumulated debt. He had borrowed money from family. He had used our accounts to cover payments. And he had believed that I would eventually help him fix everything. I asked him why he never told me. He said he was ashamed. I understood the feeling of shame. But shame doesn't justify deception. I asked about the cruise again. He admitted that he had wanted to impress his family. He wanted everyone to believe that we were financially successful. Even though the truth was very different. I asked him why he told everyone that I had approved the trip. He said, because they wouldn't have gone otherwise. That answer broke something in me. He knew the truth. He knew I would say no. And he chose to lie anyway. We began discussing separation. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches. There were long silences. There were difficult conversations. There were lawyers. There were documents. There were bank statements. And there were moments when I questioned myself. Maybe I had been too trusting. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Maybe I should have checked our finances every week. But my lawyer reminded me of something important. Trusting your spouse isn't a crime. That sentence helped me. I didn't need to punish myself for believing someone I loved. I needed to learn from what happened. I also discovered that financial abuse doesn't always look like someone stealing money. Sometimes it looks like hiding debt. Sometimes it looks like opening accounts without telling your partner. Sometimes it looks like using someone's credit because you know they won't say no. And sometimes it looks like convincing everyone that your partner agreed to something they never approved. The cruise had simply exposed everything. Eventually, Daniel moved out. The house became quiet. At first, the silence felt painful. Then it became peaceful. I focused on recovering. I returned to work slowly. I rebuilt my finances. I checked my credit. I changed passwords. I learned exactly where my money was going. For the first time in years, I was completely aware of my own financial life. It was frightening. But it was also empowering. Months later, I received a letter regarding the disputed charges. Some were reversed. Some required additional documentation. But the process moved forward. I didn't get every dollar back. And surprisingly, I eventually realized that I didn't need every dollar back to feel free. I needed my life back. 6 months after the hospitalization, I was sitting alone at a small coffee shop. I had my laptop open. My finances were organized. My bills were under control. My credit was improving. And my divorce process was nearing its end. I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier. She believed that love meant trusting someone completely. Now I understood that healthy love also requires honesty, boundaries, and respect. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. He wrote, "I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message. For a moment, I wanted to respond. Then I realized I didn't owe him a response. Not every chapter needs a final conversation. Sometimes closure comes from moving forward. I put my phone away. That evening, I walked home. The city was busy. People were rushing to restaurants, trains, offices, and apartments. Everyone was living a story I knew nothing about. And I realized something. From the outside, my marriage had looked perfect. We had a nice home. We traveled. We had good jobs. We looked happy. But appearances can hide enormous problems. The luxury cruise was supposed to make Daniel's family believe we were wealthy. Instead, it exposed the truth. A few months later, I attended a financial education workshop. The speaker talked about financial independence. She said something that stayed with me. Love someone deeply, but don't disappear inside the relationship. I wrote that sentence down. After the workshop, I opened my own savings account. Not because I expected another disaster. Because I wanted to know that I could stand on my own. I also started helping friends understand their finances. Not because I was an expert. But because I knew how easy it was to ignore things when you trusted someone. One friend told me, "I never check our statements because my husband handles everything." I gently told her, "You don't have to control everything. But you should understand everything." That became one of the biggest lessons of my life. I didn't regret loving Daniel. I regretted ignoring the warning signs. There had been moments when things didn't make sense. I simply explained them away. I thought I was protecting my marriage. In reality, I was protecting a secret. The truth was painful. But once I accepted it, I could finally rebuild. And slowly. I did. The drive to the store felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in days, my mind wasn't racing. I wasn't rehearsing arguments. I wasn't wondering if I'd overreacted. I wasn't hoping for an apology that clearly wasn't coming. I simply knew what I had to do. When I walked into the customer service department, the employee smiled politely. "Returning these?" I nodded. "Yes." She scanned the receipt, checked the unopened boxes, and within a few minutes the refund was approved. "Everything looks good," she said. "The money should be back on your card within a few business days." I thanked her and walked out carrying only one thing. The handmade baby blanket. I couldn't return that. I'd made it with my own hands. For a moment, I considered mailing it anyway. The baby had done nothing wrong. But every time I pictured Emily opening it, I remembered her message. Asterisk, "Are you still bringing the stroller?" Asterisk. Not. Asterisk, "Can we fix this?" Asterisk. Not. Asterisk, "I'm sorry." Asterisk. Just the stroller. I folded the blanket carefully and placed it in a storage box when I got home. Maybe one day things would be different. Maybe one day I'd give it to the child personally. But today wasn't that day. Around dinner time, my phone rang. Emily. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. What? Where are the gifts? Straight to the point. No greeting. No apology. They're gone. What do you mean they're gone? I returned them. The silence on the other end lasted only a second before she exploded. You what? I returned everything. You can't do that. I already did. I was counting on that stroller. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Not once had she asked why. Not once had she wondered how I felt. She was angry because she wasn't getting expensive presents. You promised. I never promised I'd reward someone for treating me like I didn't matter. Her breathing became heavier. This is unbelievable. No. What was unbelievable was asking me to wait in a pub. You keep bringing that up. Because you keep pretending it wasn't humiliating. Before she could answer, another voice came onto the line. It was Mom. Sarah. I just got here. I realized Emily must have put the phone on speaker. Can we all please calm down? I'm calm, I replied. I simply returned gifts that hadn't been given. Emily interrupted. Tell her she's being selfish. Mom didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked me one question. Sarah. If Emily apologized right now, would that change anything? I thought about it honestly. Then I answered. A real apology? Yes. I'd listen. Emily laughed sarcastically. So now I have to beg? No. You have to understand. Those were two very different things. Dad's voice suddenly joined the conversation. I agree with Sarah. The room went quiet. Emily sounded shocked. Dad? You heard me. You owe your sister an apology. I don't owe anyone anything. Dad spoke firmly. That's exactly the problem. There was another long silence. Then Emily said something none of us expected. So you're all choosing her over me? Dad answered without raising his voice. No. We're choosing what's right. Emily immediately hung up. I looked at my phone for several seconds. The conversation was over. But somehow, I knew the story wasn't. The next few days were awkward. Some relatives stopped calling Emily altogether. Others reached out to me privately. One by one, they admitted something I had suspected for years. They had seen Emily treat people this way before. Friends. Coworkers. Even extended family. But everyone kept making excuses because that's just how Emily is. Not anymore. For the first time, people were holding her accountable. 3 weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address. Just my name written neatly across the front. Inside was a handwritten note. And the signature at the bottom made my heart stop. It was from Emily. I stood in my kitchen for almost a full minute, staring at the envelope. Emily had never written me a letter before. Not once. Everything between us had always been texts, phone calls, or rushed conversations at family gatherings. Seeing my name written in her handwriting felt strange. Part of me didn't even want to open it. Another part of me hoped it contained the words I'd been waiting weeks to hear. I'm sorry. I slowly unfolded the paper. It wasn't very long. The first line read. Asterisk, Sarah, I know you're probably still angry with me. Asterisk. So far, not bad. Then I kept reading. Asterisk, I never wanted the baby shower to turn into such a disaster. Asterisk. I frowned. She still wasn't taking responsibility. She continued. Asterisk, Jason and I were under a lot of pressure. His boss was coming, and we wanted everything to be perfect. I thought you'd understand because you've always been the reasonable one. Asterisk. I stopped reading for a second. There it was again. The same excuse. The same expectation. Because I was reasonable, I was supposed to accept being treated unfairly. I finished the letter. The last paragraph said. Asterisk, I hope someday we can move past this. The baby deserves a family that gets along. Asterisk. She signed it. Asterisk Emily. Asterisk. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain she caused. No regret for asking me to wait across the street. She wanted peace. Without accountability. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt calm. That evening, I decided to write back. Not because I wanted another argument, but because I wanted to close this chapter honestly. I wrote. Emily. Asterisk, I never wanted your baby shower to become a family scandal. Asterisk. Asterisk, I wanted to celebrate with you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I painted the nursery because I loved you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I bought gifts because I was excited to become an aunt. Asterisk. Asterisk, I showed up every time you needed help because I believed we were rebuilding our relationship. Asterisk. But when you chose coworkers over your own sister. Asterisk, you didn't just take away a seat. Asterisk. Asterisk, you showed me where I stood in your life. Asterisk. I paused for a moment before writing the final paragraph. Asterisk, if you ever truly understand why that hurt me and you're willing to take responsibility, I'll be willing to have a conversation. Asterisk. Asterisk, until then, I need distance, not because I hate you, but because I finally respect myself. Asterisk. I signed my name. folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and mailed it the next morning. Weeks turned into months. Our conversations stopped completely. Family holidays felt different. Some relatives stayed close to Emily. Others quietly admitted they understood why I'd stepped away. No one tried to pressure me anymore. Then, 6 months later, Mom called. "The baby's here. A healthy little girl." I smiled. No matter what had happened between Emily and me, an innocent child had entered the world. I mailed a simple card. Inside, I wrote only one sentence. Asterisk, I hope she grows up always knowing what it feels like to be chosen by the people who love her. Asterisk. There was no money. No expensive gifts. Just sincere wishes. About a year later, I heard from Rachel that Emily had changed. Becoming a mother had forced her to see relationships differently. She'd started apologizing to several people she'd hurt over the years. One afternoon, my phone rang. "Emily." This time. Her voice sounded completely different. Quiet. Nervous. She didn't defend herself. She didn't mention Jason. She didn't blame anyone else. The first words out of her mouth were, Asterisk, Sarah. I was wrong. Asterisk. Then she cried. Not because people judged her. Not because gifts were returned. Not because the baby shower was ruined. She cried because she finally understood how deeply she'd hurt me. Forgiveness didn't happen overnight. Trust never returns that easily. We met for coffee several times over the following months. Some conversations were uncomfortable. Some ended in tears. Some ended in silence. But this time, she listened. Really listened. Today, our relationship isn't perfect. It probably never will be. But it's honest. And honestly, that's enough for me. Because I learned something through all of this. Being family doesn't give someone permission to disrespect you. Love without respect isn't healthy. Kindness without boundaries becomes sacrifice. And sometimes, the most important seat you'll ever fight for is the one you save for your own self-respect.